It's hard out here, especially when sometimes you feel like you always have to be on or you always have to be educating other people. Specialized living communities really just allow a person to focus on themselves. It creates a space where, they can explore their culture more, explore their language more, meet new people that, may teach them something or they may teach something.
You're listening to Speaking of Language, a podcast recorded at the Language Resource Center at Cornell University. Each week, we explore a topic related to language pedagogy and second language acquisition. This week on Speaking of Language,
Adriana Lima joins us to share the history and current events of one of Cornell's residential program houses, the Latino Living Center.
Welcome to a new episode of Speaking of Language. I'm Angelica Kramer, the director of the Language Resource Center at Cornell University.
And I'm Sam Lupowitz, the LRC's media manager. Today, we speak with Adriana Lima, residence hall director in Cornell's Latino Living Center.
We will learn all about the LLC and how it benefits Cornell's campus life. Welcome to Speaking of Language, Adriana.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. And so before we learn about the Latino Living Center, we'd love for you to tell us a bit about yourself. What's your background and path with languages, and how did that bring you to Cornell?
Yeah. So I am Adriana Lima. I use she, her pronouns. And then my background with languages is really more personal versus professional. Mm-hmm. I think now just with my time at Cornell is really where I am getting more involved with using my language skills that I've learned in my household with like students, other professional staff members at Cornell, and just like to engage more with like a certain community in higher ed. So my background, my family is from the Dominican Republic, and I am from the U.S. So, I grew up here, but Spanish and Dominican culture was very, very big in our household.
Sure.
My mom was actually very adamant about only speaking Spanish in our household until I started going to school. So she was like, okay, you'll learn English there.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, fun, love that. It worked out.
That's awesome.
So growing up, it really was just like a big part of our household. And then when I went to college, that was my first time ever being in a space where people didn't like speak Spanish or they didn't look like me. I went to a predominantly white institution. And so it was just very, very different, especially because the city I grew up in was predominantly like Latinos and, BIPOC people. So it was a very new experience. But there I was able to get very involved with like our Latino program, our like Latino student organizations and multicultural councils. So for me, it was just more like a personal connection to keep me like with my roots. And so I could just feel comfortable somewhere just because it was a completely new experience for me. So eventually I graduated, yay. And so I was looking at what I wanted to do and I ended up working in human resources for a while. That was during the pandemic. So it was very lonely.
I bet.
It was completely remote and it was just a bit isolating. So I really wanted to be in a space where I could get more involved and connect with people. And that's where I had the opportunity to apply to work here in housing and residential life, and specifically for the Latino Living Center. And I just thought that idea of having a living, learning community that focused on education and creating safe spaces and just like making sure the students were supported and that they were welcomed on campus. That I thought that was so cool and so wonderful because it's something that I wish I had when I was in undergrad. So long story, but that, I applied, I was able to get the position. And so all of that is what really led me here to the LLC.
Wonderful. Perfect. So the Latino Living Center is specialized on-campus housing, open to 55 first-year transfer and upper-level students. Tell us all about the LLC. When and how did it get started?
Yes, I love this question just because the start of the LLC is something that I just find so empowering. Even though I didn't go to Cornell, I'm like, it's just such a wonderful thing to learn from,
Yeah.
you know? So, and I don't want to butcher the story, but basically, I've heard it so many times from the people who were directly involved in the protests and, you know, who had a really big part in making the LLC happen. But in 1993, what is now known as the Latino Studies Program, it had a different name back then, but they had partnered with the Johnson Museum to bring in some Latino artists and to just put up some art installations on the Arts Quad. And so they were able to do that. I believe it was maybe 6 different Latino artists, which was really big for that time.
Sure.
And so some of the art was controversial. I think the one that was the most controversial was one, I do not remember the artist's name, unfortunately. This is all on our website, though. And their art installation basically said, like, the only thing to do when you visit a rich man's house is to spit in their face. And so it was like, people were like, whoa, what is happening? Like, that's a lot. And so it was just very controversial, but it was just a statement for how Latinos felt at the time that they weren't fully accepted or fully welcomed in certain spaces. And so, unfortunately, what happened was that art installation ended up being vandalized with racial slurs, swastikas, and it was just being destroyed. And the administration at the time at Cornell didn't say anything. They didn't do anything to stop the vandals from, you know, attacking these art pieces. Art is supposed to be controversial. It's supposed to make you think. It's supposed to make you wonder what's going on in the world. And so the fact that this was something that was being destroyed on campus was really hurtful to the Latino community. And so one day, a bunch of students decided to do like a barricade. They were just holding each other like from their arms, and they were protecting the installation. They said, we'll do it since the university doesn't want to do it. And so what this blockade did was it limited like the accessibility of campus. And so people had to forcibly like walk around this barricade to get to classes because there was no other way to get there. And so it started causing, like, you know, people to take notice and to be like, well, what is going on? To ask questions and for more people to get involved. So it wasn't just the Latino community. It was a bunch of allies, our, like, African-American partners, our other multicultural and international students that were a big part of this movement. Eventually, those students, they said, you know, well, we can't stand here all night, as nice as that would be, especially because it was November in Ithaca. So they decided, well, we're going to go ahead and try to talk to the president to see, like, what are they going to do about this? How are they going to protect the Latino population and just take a stand for us so that we feel that they're looking out for they're looking out for us. That's it.
Sure.
That's what they wanted. And so I believe it was like over 70 students started marching to Day Hall. And that's now known as like Day Hall Takeover. And, you know, eventually it was just a couple of students that went in and they were just asking, like, can we talk to the president? Like, we just have some concerns. Like, this is something that has hurt us and you all haven't said anything. So we just want to talk. But like they were refusing to allow these students to talk with the president. I believe he was out of town on like a trip or a conference. And so they were like, can we at least schedule a meeting? And they were just met with like hard no's saying that, you know, they had to get out. And so the students, it was very, at least from what I hear from like, you know, personal experiences, it was very spontaneous. It wasn't something that was planned. It was kind of just like, you know, we want to protect this art. We want to have a conversation. And now we're going to sit in until we have that
Sure.
conversation. And so they were there for, I believe, 4 to 5 days, refusing to leave Day Hall. They were very adamant about speaking with the president because they had a list of demands on like how the Latino population at Cornell should be treated. And so and how they should be protected. And so eventually, even after threats of like expulsion and whatnot, they had a lot of support from people on campus, from, the like students of color who, wanted to help support. And so from what I hear, they were like being given food through the windows and like water, just so that, the
Right.
students who were in the building at the time, they, had something to make them at least a little bit comfortable in the space. But eventually, after those 4 to 5 days, they were able to get a meeting with the president, and they just had a list of demands for, the Latino population at Cornell or on behalf of them. And a part of that was the Latino Living Center. The students at the time, they really wanted a space where they felt like they could explore their identity, they could explore their cultures, they can program freely, they can just hang out and,
Sure.
just have a community where it feels like the focus was representing them on a predominantly white institution. So, yeah, I think it's a really cool story. And, I feel very empowered by that, especially when I connect with. So one of the people that I talk with a lot is Getty Esquivel, and she was one of the students. She was a freshman, and she was inside the building while Day Hall was happening during the takeover. And so just hearing from her perspective how this felt like it just needed to happen
Yeah.
so that way the Latino population at Cornell wasn't pushed aside, wasn't ignored, and wasn't being like bullied in a way. Like
Yeah.
they weren't being put down for expressing themselves and their hurt and their thoughts on what
Sure.
was going on. So it felt very like it was dire to them to have this happen. And so, yeah, it created the LLC, which is a wonderful community and, the reason I have a job. So that's great. But yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Well, so tell us about the student community there. What are the students like? What kinds of backgrounds, majors, interests do you see in the LLC?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, so there are a bunch. These students are so smart. I mean, I'm sure. Well, I know all Cornell students are really smart and really great, but I have like such a pride with the students at the LLC. There are
course.
a bunch of majors in there from like people working in the sciences, people working in arts and fashion and architecture, and it's just so cool. And then their interests also vary a lot. Like you have residents who, are a bit more reserved. And so they're really just there to like, hang out, have a safe space and like maybe come to an event or two. But then you have those other really involved residents who they're in everything, all of the Latinx orgs, the fraternities, the sororities, and they're super involved in the LLC. So something that definitely brings them all together is like their love for their culture and their identity. Everyone at the LLC, they're proud to be Latinos. And I love that because sometimes, especially at a PWI, you like feel imposter syndrome or you feel like a little like out of place. And so you don't want to be too outspoken or, you don't want to like, you're just going to keep to yourself. But they're very like loud and proud, which I truly admire. So,
Yeah, that's great. So, of course, the community extends beyond just the residents. Tell us more about the faculty and the community fellows that are associated with the LLC. Who are they, And what sort of programming and other services do they bring to the table?
Yeah. So we have six faculty and staff community fellows.
Mhm.
They range from like faculty members, like in accounting, to like staff members, like in the dean of students office.
Mhm.
And so their purpose in our community is really they want to work closely with Latino students, and a part of that is because they themselves identify as
Mm.
Latinx, and so they do programming with like dinners, they'll do field trips, and sometimes they'll just come to like our Café con Leche series to just like be a presence there. And so the fellows, it's really just a way to allow students to be able to network more
Nice.
and have those connections where if they are thinking of like changing majors, oh, they may have someone who is familiar with that
Yeah,
process to
cool.
talk with, just because I'm not familiar with that.
Of course.
Or, if, it works out, we have an accounting professor, if
Mhm.
someone's taking a class and they want assistance or need
Mm.
assistance, they can reach out to them for like resources and whatnot. So they really are there to just like help support and lift up the community, which I love. I find
Mhm.
the program to be a great one.
Yeah, nice.
Very cool. And
Mhm.
I know the LLC also hosts a weekly Cafe con Leche discussion series. Can
Mhm.
you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So the Café con Leche series, it started like when the LLC first started.
Mm.
So the LLC finally came to be in 1994. And so every Friday, the Café con Leche series has been happening since then. At least
Nice.
that's what I've heard,
Yeah.
So the Café con Leche series, it ranges from like educational conversations to sometimes just being dinners, especially when students have really busy weeks.
Mhm.
And then it also ranges to more like activity or interactive or social. And it really is just a time that is set aside to be intentional with programming in our
Mhm.
community. We want to make sure our residents have the opportunity to connect with each other, to have access to certain resources, to meet campus
Yeah.
partners so they can learn more if there's something they're interested in. So it happens every Friday, 6 to 7 p.m. at the LLC in our main lounge. It is open to everyone on
Nice.
campus, so
Yeah.
it's not just for the
Mhm.
residents. We'll get a lot of student orgs that partner
Sure.
with us for those cafes, and so they'll do more recently, we had one of our Latinx fraternities
Hmm.
come in and they did like a trivia night with Afro Latino historical
Mhm.
facts and just
Cool.
like really cool information. And there were prizes and we had
Yeah.
snacks. And so that was a really good
Mm.
time. And, other times we'll have more like historical based programs where we're commemorating
Mhm.
something or we want to make sure that we have like alumni come to be able to speak on their
Yeah, great.
experiences and, just build those
Mhm.
connections.
That's wonderful.
Hmm.
Why do you think specialized residential experiences like the Latino Living Center are important?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I think that's so important just because mentioned it previously, but imposter syndrome,
Mm.
unfortunately, is so big, especially for our students of color. So I think it's just a really great way of creating an intentional safe space.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
it is the university's way of saying like you are welcomed here,
Yep.
Yeah.
and if you need just a moment to yourself, you have
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Just because
Mhm.
it's hard out here, especially when sometimes you feel like you always have to be on, or you always have to be educating other people, or you always have to know the right thing to say.
Mhm.
And so, specialized living communities really just allow a person to focus on themselves versus on everyone else. And so, it creates a space where, they can explore their culture more,
Mhm.
explore their language more. They can meet new people that, may teach them something or they may teach something
Mhm.
to them. And so I think it's a really, really great opportunity to build your confidence, especially in college where you're still figuring out who you are
Sure.
and what you want to do. And so it really is just a way to give them additional support. And then of course, if you have other people who don't identify as, specifically for the LLC, if you don't identify as Latino, that doesn't mean you can't come to the Latino Living Center. You are more than welcome to come.
Yeah.
You're just going to learn with us and explore with us, because we may not have all the answers, but we're willing to work together
That's
to,
wonderful.
figure it out. So
Great.
I think it's really, a great place to have on campus.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's in store for the LLC? Are there any plans in the works for new projects or programming that you're excited about for the
Yeah.
future?
Yeah. So we still have our Café con Leche series, and so that's always really exciting. Since it's weekly, we try to have a bunch of campus partners because it would be a lot if it was just only my
Yeah.
staff members
Yeah.
leading it out. And so we still have a bunch of open dates if anyone's interested.
Yeah.
Shameless plug. If you want to
Absolutely.
partner with us, please do.
Yeah.
And so the cafe series is always something really great to look forward to. We also have our despedida that I'll be planning with our programming coordinator soon. And so despedida is just like our goodbye event that we do at the end of the year.
Nice.
We also do a bienvenidos at the beginning of each
Cool.
year. And so that's a really huge program that we have over 30 Latinx organizations table for, and we always get about 400 to 500 people coming in
wow.
and out to check out
Yeah.
the orgs. And so we got to plan for that early just because it is a lot of work. And so that's super exciting. We also have upcoming dinners with our fellows. And so hopefully some field trips in the work. But
Nice.
yeah.
Wonderful.
hmm
Where can our listeners find out more about the Latino Living Center? And even maybe more importantly, what should students do if they're interested in living there?
Yeah. So if you want to know more about the LLC, so we do have a website, and honestly, I just Google Latino Living Center Cornell campus groups, and then it comes up because it's a website through our campus groups page. And so there you can learn all about our history. You can become an out-of-house member. So an out-of-house member is someone who they don't reside in the community, but they want to attend programming. And so they're given card access. They're given access to merch, field trips, and then they're, of course, added to the newsletter. So they have more information about the LLC. On our website, you'll also be able to reserve a space. So if your org wants to program there, or if you just want to visit the space, you can always reserve it on our website. And then if students are interested in living in the LLC, so that is through the housing portal when selection and all of that housing stuff is
Right.
coming up. I think it might have passed. I think it was in February, but in the future, it really is super simple. When you're going through the housing application process and you're choosing where you want to live, you would just select that, yes for program houses, and then you would select the Latino Living Center. And then I believe that they just have you say, I will adhere to the rules and,
Yeah.
the mission of the LLC, which is really to, explore and educate about Latinx
Right.
culture. And then, you sign up. And then when it comes around to your selection time slot and housing time slot, you can choose where you want to live. And that if it wants to be the LLC. if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
Yeah.
Terrific. Well, Adriana, it's been great to chat with you. Great to learn more about this wonderful resource that we have on our campus. Before we sign off, though, we'd like to ask you for a word in a language you love, are learning, want to learn, that makes you feel good. What's that word for you?
Yes. So for me, it is cafecito. So there is something just so satisfying about saying it. It's in Spanish, and it's not that crazy of a word. It's just coffee. But growing up, there's just something warm that I feel whenever I say it. It makes me think of my mom and my grandma. They'd have their little cafecito with galletitas in the morning, and it was I was little and I wanted to be them so bad. And so cafecito's my word. It's just makes me feel good.
Nice. Wonderful.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for speaking of language with us, Adriana.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was fun.
Next week, we hear from Blaine and Von Ray about the fastest way to fluency.
Until then,
Auf Wiederhören!
The Language Resource Center is located on the ground floor of Stimson Hall on Cornell's main campus in Ithaca, New York. Check us out on the web at lrc.cornell.edu.
and follow Cornell LRC on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky.
Speaking of Language is produced by Angelika Kramer and Sam Lupowitz.
Recorded by Sam Lupowitz.
Original music by Sam Lupowitz, Dan Gable, and Joe Gibson.
Thanks also to the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell University.
As a reminder, the ideas and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the College of Arts and Sciences or any other official entity of Cornell University.
We thank our listeners, and do stay tuned for our next episode.